The Guest List Part 3. Chapter 13, Kiara's Warning. Kiara didn't waste time. By the next morning, she had woven herself into the rhythm of the villa like she'd never left. She appeared at breakfast in an ivory silk robe and gold anklet, as if the villa itself belonged to her. She wandered through the gardens with an iced espresso in hand, barefoot on the stones, greeting staff by name, and not because she remembered, but because they remembered her. She had history here. And now she was using it. Camilla knew the type. Kiara wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. Her power came from precision compliments laced with subtle undercuts, warm smiles that always ended a second too late. She was the kind of woman who never raised her voice but always owned the room. The kind of woman who didn't play fair. By mid-afternoon, Kiara had inserted herself into nearly every conversation involving Adrien. She accidentally brought up childhood stories Camilla had never heard. She offered to help coordinate the farewell brunch, even though Camilla had already arranged it. She even casually mentioned a villa she and Adrien once visited in Lake Como, complete with a suite named after them. Camilla tried to remain neutral. Professional. Above it all. But her patience frayed when Kiara showed up uninvited at the wine tasting Camilla had personally curated, an intimate experience meant for only a handful of guests. Adrien had approved the guest list himself. And yet there she was, slipping into the seat beside him, laughing before the first glass was even poured. It was after the event, just as the staff began to clear the glasses and the last guests meandered out, that it happened. Camilla was stacking her notes when she heard footsteps behind her in the private salon. "Kiara." "Still working," she said, her voice velvet smooth. Camilla straightened. "Just wrapping up." Kiara sauntered in, slow and deliberate, like she was on a catwalk. "You've done such a lovely job," she said, her tone syrupy. "The guests adore you." "Adrien seems very taken." Camilla raised an eyebrow. "Thanks. I do my best." Kiara smiled, then stepped closer. "I thought I'd offer you a little insight." "Woman to woman." Camilla crossed her arms. "Is that what this is?" Kiara ignored the edge in her tone. "I know Adrien. Intimately. I know how he works. He loves a project. A distraction. Someone to orbit around when everything else is falling apart." Camilla's expression didn't change, but her pulse quickened. Kiara leaned in slightly. "He did it with me, too. Right after the fallout with his father. I was young, different. He pulled me in so easily. And for a while, I believed I was the exception. That I had changed something in him." Camilla said nothing. Kiara smiled, but this one didn't reach her eyes. "But Adrien doesn't let people in." "Not really. He gives you just enough to feel seen, then disappears the moment it gets real." Camilla finally spoke. "Sounds like he hurt you." Kiara tilted her head. "He didn't have to. I handed him the knife." A long pause. Then Kiara stepped back, her voice softening. "You're kind, Camilla. And smart. But you're not ready for someone like Adrien. Not the version that exists when the sun isn't shining and the music stops." Camilla stared at her. "If this is meant to scare me, it's not working." Kiara gave a shrug. "It's not a threat. Just a warning." Then she smiled again, slow, deliberate, lethal. "Be careful. This place changes people. And Adrien, he's not done changing." With that, she turned on her heel and left, heels clicking against the marble, the scent of her perfume lingering like smoke in a ballroom after the lights have dimmed. Camilla stood there for a long time. She wasn't rattled. But she wasn't untouched either. Kiara had dropped a match not to burn anything down, but just to see if Camilla would flinch at the smoke. And somewhere deep inside, something did shift. Not because she believed the warning. But because some part of her already feared it was true. That night, Camilla didn't seek Adrien out. She needed space. Stillness. Distance from all of it. But as she lay awake in her bed, sheets tangled, moonlight spilling across the floor like silver lace, she couldn't stop replaying Kiara's words. He gives you just enough to feel seen. Then disappears. Chapter 14, A Hidden Letter. Villa Rosalia had grown quieter. Not empty not yet, but the atmosphere had shifted again. The parties were slower, the guests more subdued. Some had already packed their Louis Vuitton luggage and left with polite goodbyes, citing calls back in the city or too many late nights. But everyone knew it wasn't that. The bride had never come back. And the guests had stopped pretending she would. Camilla moved through the halls with practiced grace, still managing the remaining events: a farewell brunch, a private sunset aperitivo, but her thoughts were increasingly elsewhere. Mostly with him. And sometimes, against her will, with her Allegra. The beautiful ghost bride whose absence had left a vacuum no prosecco or piano music could fill. But it wasn't until the next morning, on a routine walkthrough of the unused bridal suite, that Camilla discovered the thing that would change everything. It was supposed to be simple. Check the room. Confirm the cleaners had finished. Ensure no personal belongings remained. The suite had been left untouched since the wedding day, an elegant space locked in stasis, smelling faintly of white roses and citrus oil. Camilla moved through it quietly. The veil still hung on the closet door. The unused gown, a sleeveless couture masterpiece that looked like it belonged in a museum, remained draped over the vintage dressing screen. A pair of pale satin heels sat neatly beneath it, untouched. It was eerie, in a way. Like Allegra had simply evaporated. Camilla crossed to the writing desk, which had been cleared except for a few stationery items. She opened a drawer out of habit. And that's when she saw it. A folded piece of thick cream-colored paper, tucked in the corner beneath an ivory ribbon, and a small sprig of dried lavender. Her name wasn't on it. Neither was Adrien's. But the handwriting, delicate, slanted, unmistakably elegant, made her breath catch. She opened it carefully, slowly. And read, "I'm sorry. I know this will make a mess, and I'm sorry for leaving it behind for others to clean up. But I can't marry someone I don't know. Or worse, someone I know I'll never be allowed to know. This wedding was never about Adrien and me. It was about power, image, reputation. And I won't tie my life to a contract like that. I don't expect him to forgive me. And I don't expect you to understand. But I had to disappear before I became someone I couldn't look at in the mirror. Tell no one. Burn this if you have to." Camilla sat back in the velvet chair, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't full of rage or desperation. It was quiet. Human. Honest in a way Allegra had never seemed to be in person. This wasn't a grand escape. It was a retreat. A surrender not to fear, but to self-preservation. Camilla read the letter again, slower this time. And when she folded it neatly and slid it back into the drawer, she didn't tell the staff. She didn't tell Francesca. She didn't even tell Adrien. Not yet. Instead, she closed the door to the bridal suite softly behind her and walked out into the corridor, her heart heavy with a complicated, inconvenient sympathy. Because Allegra hadn't just run away. She had chosen herself. And now Camilla had to decide what that meant, not for the wedding, not for the villa, but for everything that was growing between her and Adrien. Was this what Kiara had meant? That Adrien had never really opened up to anyone, not even his fiancée? That maybe, he was still keeping the best parts of himself locked away? That evening, Camilla found Adrien in the study, reading near the fireplace, a glass of Amaro in his hand. He looked up and smiled, the real kind. The one that reached the edge of his eyes and tugged something uncomfortably warm in her chest. But for the first time in days, she didn't sit beside him. Not yet. She just stood near the window, watching the light flicker across the hardwood floor, and said, quietly, "Did she ever write you anything? A letter, a note, anything?" Adrien blinked. "No. Nothing." Camilla nodded slowly. I think she wanted to disappear quietly, she said, her voice soft. I think she didn't hate you. But I don't think she ever really knew you. Adrien tilted his head. And you do. Camilla met his eyes. I'm trying to. Neither of them spoke after that. But in the silence, something shifted again, not broken, not ruined. Just realigned. And the letter, tucked away in the drawer upstairs, sat like a small truth waiting for its moment. Chapter 15, The Confession. The villa felt unusually still that evening. Outside, the ocean was quiet, its waves soft against the cliffs as if the sea itself was waiting. The wind had stilled, and the usual clink of glasses or laughter from the terrace was absent. Even the staff moved more softly, as though the air had thickened with something unsaid. Camilla felt it pressing on her all-day attention just under the surface, like a storm gathering but refusing to break. She hadn't told Adrien about the letter. Not yet. But she carried it with her like a secret, folded neatly and tucked into her notebook, waiting for the right moment. The words echoed in her mind, this wedding was never about Adrien and me. It was about power, image, reputation. She believed it. What she didn't know, what she hadn't dared ask, was how deep Adrien's part in it truly went. Until that night. It started quietly. They were on the balcony outside Adrien's suite, a private terrace that jutted over the cliffside, lit by only a few lanterns and the faint, silver-blue shimmer of moonlight. He'd invited her after dinner. No guests, no excuses. Just, come talk to me. I need to say something. I owe you more. And now, they sat with a bottle of aged red between them, unsipped, untouched, as Adrien leaned forward, elbows on his knees, silent for what felt like a lifetime. Camilla didn't press. She waited. And finally, he spoke. I never wanted to marry her, he said, voice low, steady. Camilla didn't react. Just listened. I didn't love her. I didn't hate her. Honestly, I don't think I ever saw her. And she didn't see me either. That was the deal, we didn't look too closely. He sat back slowly, eyes turned toward the sea. My father orchestrated the engagement. He made it sound like a merger, not a marriage. Allegra's family controls one of the oldest private banking networks in Europe. Old money. Not flashy, not volatile, stable. My father loves stable. And you? Camilla asked. Adrien gave a short laugh. I love breathing. Which is ironic, because for a while I was choking and didn't even notice. Camilla leaned forward. Why didn't you say no? Because saying no to my father isn't just defiance. It's war. It's exile. He controls the board. The name. Everything. If I had walked away, I wouldn't just lose my seat. I'd lose everything tied to my name, the company, the properties, the foundation, even my own trust. He looked at her then. And part of me wasn't ready to lose it all. She didn't flinch, didn't turn away. That's honest, she said softly. It's pathetic, he replied. No. It's human. He studied her face. Her eyes weren't cold, or judging, or disappointed. They were kind. And that, somehow, made it worse. I told myself I'd go through with it, he said. Let them have their show. Sign the papers. Then fade out quietly. Divorce after a year, maybe two. Smile for her photos. Play the part. Be the good son. He ran a hand through his hair. But then I met you. Camilla's breath caught. Adrien didn't hesitate. The moment you walked into that room, I knew something had shifted. I didn't know what it was. I just felt it. Like someone had cracked a window in a house that had been sealed shut for years. She looked down, her hands clenched tightly around the arm of the chair. He went on. You didn't look at me like I was a stock price or a press release. You weren't impressed. Or afraid. You just saw me, and I realized how long it had been since someone did. A long silence passed between them. Then Camilla asked the question that had haunted her all week. Would you have gone through with it? If she hadn't left? Adrien turned to her. His answer came without hesitation. Yes. She swallowed. But I would have regretted it every single day. Camilla nodded slowly, eyes shining, though she blinked the sting away. You're angry she left? No, he said. I'm grateful. Another silence. Then Adrien leaned in just slightly, his voice gentler now. I know this isn't fair. That I'm saying this now after everything. But I had to tell you. Because these last few days, being with you, talking to you, feeling things again, it's the only thing that's felt real in years. He paused. I don't expect anything from you, Camilla. Not now. Not ever. But I wanted you to know the truth. All of it. She looked at him, really looked. And what she saw wasn't a billionaire. Or a groom left at the altar. She saw a man complicated, flawed, vulnerable, finally standing in the wreckage of the life he had pretended to live. And choosing something else. Maybe someone else. She reached for the wine and poured them each a glass. A small smile curved at the corner of her lips as she passed him his. To honesty, she said. Adrien touched his glass to hers, quiet, solemn. To starting over. They drank in silence, not because there was nothing to say but because, finally, nothing needed to be hidden. Chapter 16, Lines Blur. It began with a touch. Small. Accidental. A brush of fingers across a wine glass. But something shifted. It had been building for days under starlit dinners, shared confidences, whispered moments in quiet corners of Villa Rosalia, but now, something about that simple, unintended contact set the evening tilting on its axis. Camilla felt it in her chest. A flutter. Not panic, not fear, but the undeniable recognition that things had crossed some invisible threshold. After Adrien's confession, the evening didn't end in a dramatic declaration or a sudden kiss. It unfolded slowly. Naturally. They didn't leave the terrace right away. Instead, they stayed, talked more. Laughed quietly. Let the sea and the moonlight wrap around them like a shared blanket. The air between them grew warmer, softer. The pauses longer. Their eyes meeting, lingering, drifting. Camilla had always been careful with lines. She'd made a career out of managing chaos by keeping herself outside of it. Composed. Controlled. But with Adrien, the lines were starting to blur, not through grand gestures, but through everything just beneath. The way he looked at her now. Not intensely, but with quiet intent. The way her voice softened when she said his name. The way silence between them had stopped being awkward, and started feeling like a conversation of its own. When they finally stood, it wasn't planned. It was late. The sea was silver. The lanterns had dimmed. Camilla made a move toward the door, wine glass still in hand. Adrien followed. His footsteps behind her were slow, measured, like he didn't want the night to end, but wouldn't say it aloud. In the corridor just outside the terrace, they stopped both at the same time, for no reason. They turned to face each other. Too close. She felt his breath before she heard his voice. Can I ask you something, he said. Camilla nodded, quietly. If things had been different, he said, if we'd met in London, some rainy morning in Marylebone, both strangers, would we have ended up here anyway? She didn't answer right away. The question was dangerous. Not in its content, but in how much she wanted to believe in it. I don't know, she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think I would have noticed you. Adrien's hand came up slow, tentative, to brush a stray hair from her cheek. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. You make it very hard not to want more, he said. Camilla looked up at him, her throat dry. And what do you want? There was a silence. Then his hand dropped. Not because the moment had passed, but because he was still holding back. She could feel it. He was trying to be respectful, cautious, careful, trying not to rush what had already begun. Camilla reached for his hand without thinking. Just a small, simple gesture. But everything about it made the air between them feel alive. They didn't sleep together that night. There was no kiss. No dramatic embrace. But the intimacy had deepened not physically, but emotionally. Something unspoken passed between them. An understanding. An allowance. Camilla returned to her suite later with her heart racing and her mind spinning. She stood on the balcony for a long time, watching the moon cast silver trails over the sea, her robe pulled tight around her. She wasn't afraid of what was happening between them. But she knew what it meant. This was no longer temporary. She wasn't the planner anymore. She wasn't just the person cleaning up after a disaster. She wasn't even just a guest in his strange, suspended world. She was something more. And she knew it. The next morning, the air in the villa had changed again. Adrien was different but not distant. He found her near the breakfast veranda and didn't hesitate to touch her this time. His hand brushed her lower back lightly as he leaned in to greet her. The gesture was small, almost imperceptible. But Camilla felt it everywhere. Their conversations now had a rhythm. A oui. An ease that hadn't been there before. Guests noticed. Staff noticed. Francesca, especially, noticed. Kiara noticed too. But no one said anything. Not yet. Because it wasn't official. It wasn't scandalous. It was just two people, slowly stepping past the line they weren't supposed to cross. That night, Camilla couldn't sleep. She slipped from her bed, barefoot and restless, and found herself wandering the villa's quiet halls again. Only this time, she wasn't lost. She knew exactly where she was going. Adrien's suite. She paused outside the door. Not knocking. Just standing. Her heart loud in her chest. Before she could raise her hand, the door opened. Adrien stood there, barefoot, in a grey t-shirt and linen trousers, his eyes sleepy but calm as if he'd been expecting her. Neither of them said a word. She stepped forward. He stepped aside. And though nothing more happened that night than shared space and shared quiet, it was the beginning of everything. Chapter 17, Father of the Groom. The arrival was unannounced. There was no heads-up from the assistant, no courtesy call, no car in the driveway until it was already too late. Camilla was in the breakfast courtyard with Adrien, reviewing the guest list for the farewell brunch, when the staff froze mid-step. The subtle shift in energy was immediate. A few seconds later, the butler cleared his throat and murmured low, like he was announcing a death. Signore Dante Moretti has arrived. Adrien stiffened beside her. Just slightly. Not panic, not fear, but the kind of tension that came from years of knowing what was coming and realizing you couldn't stop it. Camilla barely had time to speak before Dante Moretti entered the courtyard, immaculate in a dove grey suit and matte black sunglasses, as if the cliffs of Positano were simply another boardroom. He carried no luggage. Just his phone in one hand and presence in the other. Power radiated from him like heat. He was older than Adrien, of course taller, broader, silver-haired, and razor-sharp, but the resemblance was clear. Same bone structure. Same gaze that could slice through a room. But where Adrien's intensity was layered in charm and softness, Dante's was blunt. I see. Engineered. He approached the table without greeting anyone, not even his son. Camilla de Santis, he said, turning toward her. I've read your name a dozen times in reports. We've never met. Camilla stood. Mr. Moretti. Welcome. I doubt either of us means that, he said coolly. Adrien's voice cut in, calm and steely. Why are you here? Dante turned to him. You didn't think I'd let this farce continue without intervention, did you? The conversation moved swiftly, not toward resolution, but toward collision. They relocated to the drawing room, staff dismissed, Doors closed. Camilla remained, invited by silence. She wasn't just a planner now. She was in this. Dante didn't sit. He stood by the fireplace, fingers laced behind his back, every gesture rehearsed to deliver maximum pressure. "You humiliated us," he said. "You let a carefully arranged alliance fall apart, and then you invited gossip by keeping the guests here, wandering around this villa like it's a goddamn movie set." Adrien leaned against the arm of the sofa, one ankle crossed over the other, unfazed. Allegra left. "I didn't stop her. You should have made sure she didn't want to leave. She wasn't an acquisition. She was a strategy." Adrien's tone cooled. "And that's exactly why she left." Dante's gaze sharpened. "You think this is about feelings? About romance? Your feelings don't protect your name, your assets, your future. I didn't raise you to be emotional. I raised you to be untouchable. And look where that's gotten us," Adrien said. The silence that followed was thick. Cold. Then Dante's eyes landed on Camilla. He took 2 steps toward her. "You've been quite close to my son this week." Camilla didn't flinch. "He asked me to stay. To help." "I'm sure he did," Dante said, with the thinnest edge of a smile. "You've been influential." Adrien stepped forward. "Stop." But Dante ignored him. "Tell me, Miss DeSantis, what exactly do you think this is? A love story? Do you think you're the exception? That you'll be allowed in?" Camilla met his eyes. She refused to shrink. "I think your son is capable of deciding for himself what matters." Dante's eyes narrowed. "That's where you're wrong. Adrien doesn't decide. He inherits. An inheritance has rules." Camilla didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, Adrien moved not just closer to her, but in front of her, subtly, silently. A protective gesture, casual but clear. "She's not your concern," he said. Dante's voice turned cold. "She'll cost you everything." Adrien looked him straight in the eye. "Then she's worth more than everything." A beat of silence. Then Dante exhaled, straightened his cufflinks, and turned for the door. "You'll regret this," he said. But Adrien only watched him go. After Dante left the room, neither of them moved for a long moment. Camilla sat slowly, the breath she'd been holding finally leaving her lungs. "You okay?" Adrien asked gently. "No," she said, "but I will be." He sat beside her. They didn't talk about what had just happened. Not yet. Because the truth was, Dante Moretti had said what needed saying. And now the choice stood in the open like a flare on the marble floor. Stay and risk everything. Or walk away before it's too late. Chapter 18, The Ultimatum. The echo of Dante Moretti's footsteps still haunted the villa. Though he'd left hours earlier, his car vanishing down the winding cliff road without ceremony or farewell, the air hadn't cleared. It lingered, heavy and bruised, like a summer storm that refuses to break. Camilla sat on the balcony of her suite, staring out at the dark sea below. The moon cast long shadows over the stone balustrades, and somewhere in the distance, waves broke against the rocks with soft fury. She hadn't said much since the confrontation. Neither had Adrien. But she knew what came next. The decision. The reckoning. And whether or not she wanted to admit it, she knew this wasn't just his choice. It was hers, too. Downstairs, Adrien stood alone in the villa's library, a space more museum than room, filled with leather-bound volumes, polished walnut shelves, and the scent of centuries-old paper. He wasn't reading. He was waiting. For his father to return. For the pressure to lift. For a future to choose him. He wasn't sure which. But when Francesca entered, face tight, eyes sharp, holding her phone like a weapon, he knew he wouldn't have the luxury of delay. "He's issued an order," she said without preamble. Adrien turned toward her, slow. "An order?" "Yes." If you don't publicly clarify the status of your engagement and issue a statement distancing yourself from Miss DeSantis, the board will move to place you in an inactive position." Adrien gave a humorless laugh. "Inactive? As in, banished?" Francesca didn't blink. "As in removed. Your father's already initiated a transfer of voting rights. He's threatened this before. He's never pulled the trigger." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "This isn't about just you anymore. The investors are watching. The press is circling. If you don't make a decision now, the damage may be irreversible." Adrien looked past her, out the arched window at the garden below, the very place he'd first told Camilla the wedding didn't matter. That he didn't care. But he did care. Now more than ever. He cared about her. Francesca softened. "You can end this quietly. Camilla returns to London. No scandal. No headlines. We claim Allegra left for personal reasons. The wedding is postponed indefinitely. You'll still have everything." Adrien's jaw tensed. "Everything? Yes," she said. "Except the girl." Later that night, he found Camilla in the rose courtyard, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her hair down, tousled by the sea breeze. She turned when she heard him, her eyes already searching his. She knew. Before he said a word, she knew. "They want you to walk away," she said. He nodded once. "And they're prepared to make it cost everything if I don't." A long silence passed between them. Then she asked, gently, "What are you going to do?" He stepped closer. "Not rushed. Not panicked. Just certain. I've lived my life trading pieces of myself for peace. And I told myself it was fine, as long as I kept something left, something untouched. But lately, I've realized, there's almost nothing left that hasn't been shaped by someone else's hand." Camilla swallowed, her voice barely audible. "And me? You're the only part no one told me to choose." He looked at her like she was the one thing in the world that hadn't been orchestrated, packaged, or branded. She was simply herself, kind, fierce, impossibly real. "They want me to choose legacy," he said. "But I'd rather choose a life." He took her hand, gently, reverently. "I told him," Adrien said, "that if I ever marry, it'll be my choice. My love. Not his contract." Camilla stared at him. "What did he say?" "He said I'd lose everything." A beat. Then he left. She took a shaky breath. "And what did you say?" Adrien smiled, a slow, quiet, almost defiant smile. "I told him I'm not for sale." She kissed him. There was no hesitation. No second guessing. It wasn't the first kiss of a romance. It was the first kiss of a decision. A leap. A surrender. And in that moment, wrapped in moonlight and roses and the ache of everything they were leaving behind, Camilla knew they had crossed a final threshold. Not just into each other. But into something new. A life untethered. Unapproved. Unapologetically theirs. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening to Billionaire Romance Stories, where love meets luxury in the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We love hearing your favorite twists and favorite theories. And don't forget to ring that bell, because in this world of yachts, secrets, and luxurious romance, the next story is always one click away.